Aloha and welcome to The Art of Life. I am your host, Willow Chang Alion. We broadcast live every Friday from 2 to 3 p.m. But truth be told, today we're taping in advance because tomorrow is our nation's birthday. Happy 4th of July. Hope you have a wonderful one. Don't blow off any fingers or toes. They come in handy. Our guest certainly uses his fingers to make wonderful, wonderful things. That sounds scandalous, but we're talking about music. We have none other than Duane Padilla. And I think for several years I was saying your name wrong, so shame on me.
It's okay.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. In the pursuit of journalistic integrity, I must disclose that Duane and I work together with Hot Club of Hula'ville, and you've seen Sonny Silva and Jonathan Seifert and Ernie Provencher, and oh my goodness, we're just going through the whole band here. But the reason that we can do that, other than the fact that they're interesting people, is that they're so diverse as artists and they contribute so much to Hawaii, and that's what Art of Life is all about.
Right.
So, following our wonderful format, if you haven't figured out by now, we have one. We always have the origin story, just like superheroes, and I'd love to know more about how Duane came to be. I know that you're a twin, and
Right.
you're both musically inclined, but tell us all about that good stuff.
So the very beginning, I guess, I was 4 years old, and I was listening to the radio in a freakishly mesmerized way that my dad had no idea what to do. I was just like staring at the radio like this. And so my auntie said, maybe you should just sign him up for violin lessons. And so they opened up the yellow pages of the phone book and they just dropped their finger. And it turned out to be one of the best teachers in Los Angeles. And she specialized in teaching kids who were 4 years old. So we just walked into this lady's studio, and she was basically my musical mother for 18 years. Yeah.
Wow, and you still stay in touch?
Still stay in touch?
You send her like promotional stuff and CDs?
Yeah. I sent her a Christmas card, and I talked to her on the phone every couple months and stuff.
That's serendipity if there ever was one. Now I'm curious, when you heard the radio, did you think that the people were inside the radio? Or, I mean, when I was a kid and I listened to the radio with frequency, I thought people were in the studio actually playing the music live. I don't know where I got this idea.
Yeah. I sort of did, and funny, I even remember that day when I was listening to the radio, I heard the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto on the radio, and I said, one day, I think I'm going to play that piece. And it took me about 20 years to get to that piece, but I always had that in the back of my mind when I was studying on that someday I'm going to play the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto.
The importance of a goal. This is a thread that we see with frequency. So at that point, were both you and your brother enrolled at the same time? Was it like buy one, get one free, or you both had music, or he had no choice and you were driving the car?
I think, well, we both at that point actually thought very much the same, so we both wanted to study at the same time with the same, and we were very competitive, so we'd just totally, like, I'd be practicing and he'd be practicing, and it would be one of these sibling things, like, I'm not going to be the first one to quit first, so several hours later every day, it's like, fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
Are you aware of a lot of other musician twin sibling rivalry, or is this a commonality? Or?
I think so. Like, it's funny. I remember we entered a competition when we were in college, and one of the things in the competition was, if you have a marketing gimmick, we welcome that. So we figured we're going to ride this twin violin thing as a gimmick all the way to the finals.
It was like twins or naked violinists.
Yeah.
We'll go for twins.
Yes. So we get to the finals, and we thought we did okay, and then right after, the Zhang brothers, twin violin dueling duos, they're there too, and then both of us lost to the Katona twin guitar duo at the end. So, I mean, there's quite a few guys doing this twin thing. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Darn it, that's what my parents, they should have made a twin of me. I just have a brother.
Yeah.
Fascinating. So clearly the music was something that not only compelled you in your youth, but you are still a musician. So you took it to the full tilt boogie. Tell us about that.
Well, for me in music, it's been a lot of things in my life. Like, when I was a kid, I was kind of an awkward kid. So sports, not so good. So, you know, it's the thing to do that I could sort of feel like I owned it. So that put me through. And it's taken me a lot of places traveling and stuff like that.
You continued on with your education. You want to give a shout out to your alma mater?
Oh yeah, alma mater. So yeah, Northwestern University undergrad and Yale University for my master's degree.
Not shabby at all, my American friends.
Yeah.
Were you ever in a position where you, I don't want to say struggle, but were you ever conflicted? Like, should I stay with the music path, or should I go strictly to conservatory, or should I do liberal arts? I mean, was that ever an issue for you? Because sometimes people have a hard time with that.
It's been actually, I was on the fence all the way until my master's. So as I went to Northwestern for my undergrad. I still had not admitted to myself that I wanted to be a professional musician. And with the encouragement of my parents, I decided to double major in violin and psychology. And so I got to the end of this 5-year double degree program, and I still didn't know what to do. So I ended up like applying to music school, applying to psychology grad school, and then taking corporate job interviews for all kind of things. I think I took interviews over like, American Express Financial Advisors and, some ad agencies, and couldn't buy a job and couldn't to get into psych grad school. And so music became the fallback. A lot of times, people say, oh, you need something to fall back when the music doesn't work out. But then all those other things that were supposed to be stable didn't work out. So I said, I guess music's the fallback then. And so that's how I ended up in music grad school. And then from there, I said, okay, fine, if that's the way it's going to be, then it's the way it's going to be then.
So I guess you're not supposed to self-analyze, or not. But what do you think might have been the resistance in those earlier years to pursue music and put that at the forefront?
I think more as anything, the financial thing. My dad, he's a mechanical engineer. He's very practical. So we'd be eating breakfast, and he'd be reading the classified ads, and he'd be like, no jobs listed here for violinist. I know that's what you like to do, but maybe you should think about something else. And so, growing up your whole childhood is dad looking at the want ads for them. It makes you think that maybe this is a financially stable, viable option. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so flash forward. How did you get from the mainland, as we local people call it, continental U.S., if you need a further explanation, to Hawaii? What brought you to our fair islands?
That was more serendipity. So I think 2 years before I came to Hawaii, I was playing in an opera festival in Virginia, of all places, and my stand partner was Iggy Jang, the concertmaster of the Honolulu Symphony. And so they had auditions. So then I didn't see him for a while. So we were stand partners. He's a really nice guy. And then 2 years later, I get this one-word email from Iggy. It's like, want to come to Hawaii?
That's more than one word.
One sentence. And so then as a joke, I sent him a very short reply, sure. And then 1 month later, he said, meet me in New York, bring CD with excerpts. With the little excerpts. Yeah. So then I met him at a coffee shop in New York, and then I gave him the CD, and he said, and then he told me the real deal is that 2 women had gone on maternity leave, and then they had national auditions. They didn't like anybody, and they just needed 2 people to come in and sub for 9 months.
Wow.
And so, but then 12 years later, I'm still here. So
can't get rid of him. That is awesome.
Yeah. So and then at that point, it was with very little notice. It was in September, and then that I met Iggy, and then I was teaching full time at a Suzuki Music School at that point, and after I went to Iggy, the next day I went to my boss. I'm taking a 1-year sabbatical. I'm going to Hawaii. See you. And then my boss was like. Yeah. But then I was confident and cocky back then, and my boss was not so much. And they're like, okay, I guess we'll just have to give you a sabbatical then. And she bought it, so they kept my job there for a whole year.
Wow.
Thinking that I would come back, but knowing in the back of their mind who would move to Hawaii and then come back. So
it very, very rarely happens. Yeah. It very rarely happens. I was thinking about this on the car drive over, because it's been 20 years since I went to Egypt. And it was similar in the sense that I auditioned on a Sunday, and I think I left on a Thursday. I had like a 4-day turnaround to throw things in a suitcase, do a Costco run before the internet, didn't know anything about it. And I think sometimes it's that opportunity to just go for it. Michael Hamilton, who was our guest last week, same thing. I mean, he sold everything and moved to Hawaii. It happens with frequency, with great results. Yeah. So here you're in Hawaii. You wear many, many hats. I'm just going to go through a few of the ones that I'm aware of, with the understanding there's probably things I'm unaware of. So clearly you teach music. You perform frequently. I mean, man, you work like a dog, if you don't mind me. And that's a compliment. Like, I mean, I think between you and Ernie, it's probably a duke out who works the most frequently. You're a photographer. You self-produce albums, writing music as well?
Arranging.
Self-taught also with the guitar, so picking up that axe. I remember just 2 years ago it was like, oh, I have this thing, and now in the gigs you're like, it's beyond comping. You're just noodling and doing all kinds of stuff. What else do you do?
Oh. On the side, I remember because I was playing with the synth, they had some financial trouble. So at one point I went to culinary school one summer. So at some point I was doing
I forgot to mention foodie.
Yeah, I was doing some catering on the side. So yeah, I make a mean rack of lamb. That's my signature dish.
He is a world-class foodie. Could probably ask about any eating joint on the island, and you've been there.
Pretty much.
Yeah. So what floats your boat? Cross-pollination I think is something that a lot of people they toy with, and some people really delve into. But like I love film. I'm a secret cinephile. haha, or not so secret. I'll even write reviews to films. What do you like to do in addition to music? What type of things influence your music in that cross-pollination?
For me, actually, the food is actually a huge influence on my music making. I was reading that there's this great book, I forget the author, but the way that they describe a meal is very much like you would describe music. Like there's a tempo that the food comes out in, and like when you take a bite of something, there's a beginning of it, and then there's a middle,
there's
and
a
then there's
fermata.
an end. Yeah, and some of it's crispy and go chick 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 chick, and the other is more mushy and gooey in your. And the pacing of food is a lot like music actually, like a piece of music or even a recital. I often with my students when they're giving a concert, like the first piece is something like an appetizer, and then you might do Brahms as a serious main course, and then something
So
sweet
music or
and short at the end.
Twinkies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, food and music are pretty much one and the same, which is why I like to do both.
I will have to add to that fragrances, I'm addicted to my nose. It's true. I smell everything. It can be taken any way you want to. But if you ever go into a site, we have nothing to do with them, but I love them, fragrantica.com. Every nose-driven human on the planet seems to find their way to this website, and people review fragrances. And I mean, the sensual quality that people imbue these reviews with, or I mean, you would think either they're writing about their lover or their favorite food or a sunset. I mean, it's remarkable, and you can of course follow people, which is what the 21st century is about, the cult of personality. But I mean, there are certain people, when I read their reviews, I would bet money on it because they are so consistent with their analysis of what creates a fantastic scent. And I'm sure food is the same way.
Right.
Indeed. So, us musicians, if I lump us all together, we kind of deal with some unique situations that I think that are a little different now than they were even, a generation technically is defined as 25 years. So 25, 30, 40 years ago, I'm going to just generalize here, but I think people had better understanding of how to interact in public and how to receive and be interactive with music, whatever that is. What do you see when you play music? What kind of things like surprise you, appall you, make you shake your fist? I mean, do you see that there's been a deterioration, or do you think that there's been a holding pattern?
I think, well, coming from the point of view of as a classically trained violinist, I mean, 25 years ago, people were more willing to sit in a concert and listen quietly and seriously, actively listen. I think these days, music is more a part of everyday life, which is good and bad. Like, the good is that it's a part of everyday life, it's always around.
Right.
But a lot of times it's always in the background.
Sonic wallpaper.
Yeah, so I know for a lot of classical musicians, they kind of assume that the music has a right to be heard on its own. And they get insulted when people don't actively listen. And I don't know, my theory on that, like, I spent a lot of time in high school as a street musician, and that's like the ultimate of ambient. Like, you're on the sidewalk, on a busy sidewalk, and you have to fight for the right to be heard. And I think, for classical musicians, why people have to have that more, it's not just an assumption that people are going to listen. You kind of have to fight for it and earn people's attention and respect to keep listening. Yeah, and so that fight is, you have to fight a little bit harder now than
So things like, and this is nothing exclusive to Hawaii, pops, symphony, or light shows, or the music of John Williams, or integrating dance. I mean, hey, everyone loves a spectacle, but what do you think? I mean, have we reached a point where it's absolutely necessary? Will people come simply to hear Beethoven's Ninth? I certainly hope so.
Well, this is my take on it. Because you can still, I think, you can still grab people's attention and play Beethoven's Ninth if you play it at a much higher level than we're used to seeing it. Like, a lot of classical musicians are trained and they just play it like they are in school, and they're hired to do this gig and they just play it. But like rock musicians, they play with a certain level of emotional immediacy that classical musicians don't have. And so I think that's more what they need. And I think that's why a lot of symphonies are having trouble, because they're trying to water it down a little bit.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you do a tribute show with an 80-piece orchestra, Paul McCartney can still out-Beatles you, and it's only 4 guys. Yeah. So, because they're at that level, because they have the emotional immediacy and they know how to do it. Like, a lot of people who didn't study how to play Beatles, and there's 80 people, and they're sort of doing it, it's still not as appealing. You should have just let them play Beethoven, what they know, and get them riled up enough that they can, do it with all their verb, and just, that's why I think a lot of venues in classical music go in the wrong direction with the pop scene.
We're going to translate for our folks out there, because Duane possesses a skill which is indeed a skill. That is the ability to shift gears from the classical realm to gypsy jazz, jazz, I mean, probably folk tunes, you name it, bar mitzvahs, he does it all. That is really, really rare. I mean, that's the equivalent of being fluent in, say, Cantonese and Mandarin, or Shakespearean language and Pidgin English, or whatever parallels you want to draw. It's the ability to swing. I mean, if you were to distill it into something, is that ability to swing, to be able to stretch things out, to understand the essence of what makes the music, what's appropriate for that genre of music. Foo. I felt like I was going to say something. That's what happens when my brain gets really excited. There are, well, coming back to music, there's a lot of music that gets, let's say, general airplay. Beethoven's Ninth comes to mind. Handel's Messiah. Water music with Vivaldi. I mean, every time they want to sell a luxury car, there was a time in the 80s where it's like, well, hey, it's copyright free and we'll throw on the sophistication of classical music. What music do you think is just either overplayed or under-recognized? Because you certainly must have some music in that mix.
Well, overplayed? Pachelbel's Canon is probably the most overplayed music. Piece of all time, because it's on everybody's, but it's a beautiful piece.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the reason why it's popular, because it's a great piece, but you know, it's just overplayed. Underplayed, there's a lot of obscure classical composers.
You said Brahms. The moment you said that, the bells are ringing, and I thought, yeah, Brahms just underplayed.
Underplayed, and then
Chopin underplayed.
Yeah, and there's some even more obscure ones. Shostakovich. If you live a life of angst, he's a good one to listen to, actually.
Indeed, with some Solzhenitsyn on the side. You know, the Russians and their angst, we love them for that. What type of things would you like to see happen in Hawaii?
Artistically or otherwise?
Just all of the above. Like, I think we just need more venues, personally.
Yeah. Well, I talk with older musicians who've been around, because I moved out here in Hawaii in 2001. People talk about a golden age of Waikiki
showroom.
when there was when it was a lot like Broadway, or like even how Vegas is sort of becoming like Broadway was.
Right.
You know, where there's just a lot of activity. Like if you go to Waikiki now, there's maybe one show showing. Is there even one? I think there's that Legends show.
I think there's Legends, and I think there's Magic of Polynesia. I don't know if SOS is doing their thing.
I think they stopped.
Then there was like Cirque Hawaii, and I think that they fizzled out.
Yeah, but those are all small little things. I mean, I grew up in Los Angeles. I mean, there's shows all the time, and people go to them, locals, and you know, I think that's the kind of thing that I think would really help Hawaii's economy, and also just provide an artistic outlet for artists.
You know, you mentioned something, and it just came into my mind. One of the things I think that's so interesting about Los Angeles is that when you're in shows there, the call time of when the show actually starts usually is 8.
Right.
I mean, here in Hawaii, we start things at like 7 or 7:30, and I mean, heaven forbid when people start things at like 6. I don't know what they're thinking. Given, you know, and I asked some of my LA friends, like, wow, because it feels late, but it makes sense. I'm a little night owl, and I asked them, like, what's the impetus to have the show start at 8? And they said, well, it's traffic. Right. Everyone, you know, is they're all over creation trying to just get to the venue. Hawaii's kind of reached that point also. I'm wondering if we shift the time back collectively to have things start at 8, if that would maybe just mix it up a bit. I don't know.
That could work. I know I was reading some magazine in New York, because they're trying to get a younger crowd. So there was actually some orchestra that started having concerts at 11 o'clock at night to try to pander to that younger generation of listeners. Yeah, and it's working. That's what I've heard.
We like it. Now, you've got your wonderful instrument here with us. I'd love for you to just like riff and share some things. You know, one of the things I think was essential for me as a child was shows like Mr. Rogers or even Sesame Street. They always had instrumentalists, musicians. They would explain things and talk about the sound. And some people, maybe they grew up listening to Peter and the Wolf or Leonard Bernstein. Education is so important. So maybe you can just, you know, give us a sonic journey of what the violin can
I was
create.
doing this before you came. I was talking with the producer, and maybe I think a good demo would be the different ways the violin can sound, because the way you play it can alter depending on the thing. I think maybe like classical violin. The main thing is what are the hallmarks of a good classical violin? It's a beautiful tone, all the notes beautifully the same,
and legato.
And legato.
Perhaps,
so you know so. then, but you know, if you were to play more jazzy style on violin, maybe the tone wouldn't be so as even. There would be some notes louder, some notes softer, and the rhythm wouldn't be so steady. There would be some long notes and short notes. You know. Right? Or if you would do a fiddlers, the rhythm is simpler, but then they put accent in weird places. So, and then the tone is even more uneven than in jazz. So. Yeah, so you know, there's all these different sounds that can come out of the instrument.
Yeah. You know, I think that's so essential because when children are introduced, or anybody for that matter, but we're going to say kids because people seem to be stuck in the mindset that to start something like an instrument you have to be a child, assuming that the mind is more malleable. But there's advantages to starting things later in life, and I'm grateful to have met many people who've done just that. That being said, if you're conditioned to think that an instrument like the violin, you can only create and aspire to one sound, which is classical, but maybe your world is just going to be blown apart hearing something like a fiddle. It's so sad because I always think of like how many kids quit taking whatever instrument they are taking or studying because they just don't relate to the type of music that's being asked of them to play.
Yeah, because I do, aside from performing, I have a huge career as a teaching violin, and it's interesting. I'm teaching the school now, and so. I see, they had a spring workshop, and there's all these very highly advanced, classically trained violinists going through the Suzuki Violin Method, very serious program. And they asked me to do a fun jazz improvised workshop. And then it was funny, because the kids, if you just gave them the permission to play how they feel, it was an amazing turnaround. So all these kids that were actually, they were well trained, but they were like the ones who weren't that enthusiastic, and maybe the B crowd of kids, not the A crowd of kids. We're playing stuff that their teachers couldn't believe that they were playing, you know, because they had the permission to do what they wanted and didn't have to do what the book said.
Outside the lines.
Yeah.
We like that.
So that's the thing about jazz improvising that's good, that I like to teach it to the kids. Is just it gives them permission to be who they are. Like classical music is quite rigid. I mean, Brahms wrote down the music, and most classical musicians revere the score. You play exactly the printed thing. It's a huge discipline, and it's a good discipline. It trains you for a lot of things: be a lawyer, doctor, how to study. But a lot of times
brain surgery.
But a lot of times, I mean, kids, they just want to express themselves. And if you just give them the permission to do so, it's amazing what they'll do.
Even the tools, so the understanding that foundation, because if I make a blanket statement here, every great artist, if you look into their dossier and their file and you research them, they usually have some element of a classical training. They have something that they've studied for a certain period of time with a guru, a sensei, what have you. But it is that foundation that allows them to be the springboard to then create, which is really the heart of improvisation. I think people think you're just pulling rabbits out of your butt. We only do that once in a while. Yeah. But it's a wonderful thing because you have put in the work. You've got your chops, so to speak.
Yeah. A teacher, he had a funny way of saying it. It's like you have to know the rules before you can break them.
Absolutely.
So that's the thing with the classical study. It really sets you up that you know what the parameters are of music, and you can decide how you're going to follow those parameters.
Craziness. So tell us about things that you do. I know that you're with Vivo, with Hot Club of Huluville, Pierre Grill. I know you guys are doing something for Bastille Day. You teach at Punahou. Are you still flying to Maui?
I was doing that for 10 years, but I stopped going just because it was the ticket price was so expensive. Hawaiian Airlines, you got to give us cheaper tickets.
Hawaiian Air, you got to like cut us artists a break here. And I'm so sad that the Super Ferry's gone. So you were going outer island as well. Those students, do they come and visit you now? Does the mountain come to Mohammed's?
I think some are doing Skype lessons. Yeah, that one was an interesting thing. That was another serendipitous thing. I went over there 10 years ago because one of my friends was starting an after-school exposure program. There in Maui, not too many people play violin, so I figured, let's go, we show the kids a violin what it looks like, and maybe after a week of classes, they'll play one fun song, and that'll be the end of that nice summer.
Right.
And so I did that. I taught the kids how to play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, and at the end of the class, they were in tears. And I asked, why? Because you're going to leave, and then we can't continue.
Oh.
So then I made a promise, okay, fine, I'll keep coming over until you guys want to stop. And then 10 years later, I mean, it was a whole journey, and some of them, I mean, I think there's several of them now that are studying at this nationally prestigious music school in Indiana University right now.
Fantastic. I think we met one of them at the Maui Jazz Festival 2 years ago. Fantastic. I'm curious about your instrument, because that is something that really stores the mana. In Hawaiian, we talk about the spirit, or in Japanese Shinto, they talk about the kami. So I definitely am a believer that everything that you use with frequency that you're also creating with, I mean, hey man, your mana's got to be definitely stored in both the bow and your violin. How do you determine which instrument comes to the top?
Oh.
I'm sure you have several violins, and they all serve different purposes, but do you have a favorite? Do you play favorites literally?
I have several instruments. This one actually, I brought a special one, and this one, because I have a twin brother who also plays violin, we had a violin maker commission us twin fiddles. Yeah, so this one, the piece of wood in the back of this violin and his violin are from the same block of wood.
Oh.
So they're literally twins, born on the same day. yeah.
Christened with no
yeah. So this one is the one when we play together, we play this one. And it's interesting because that's right. They were brand new, so when you picked it up and played it for the first time, it's like a little baby that doesn't know how to talk.
Oh.
So for the first 5 years, you actually have to train the wood to vibrate correctly. And so it's like teaching a little kid to walk. And so now 10 years, I think it was made in 1999. Now it has its own voice. And it's interesting because they were the same violins from the same block of wood. And when we first bought them, they sounded the same. But my brother plays very different than me. So if you play each of the violins now, they sound completely different. They each have a completely different personality.
So
and that's just because you can literally see the influence of the player on the instrument.
I'm curious, what are some of the, can we say biohazards? That sounds so terrible. What are some of the concerns that you have to deal with your instrument here in Hawaii? Because we have humidity, we have sea spray. I mean, sometimes the elements are kind of brutal to just stuff. So what type of things do you have to do to maintain an instrument like this?
Well, here in Hawaii, because it's so humid, the main concern is that the wood swells up. And so luckily on a good violin like this, they actually use a glue to hold it together that's not too sticky.
Okay.
Yeah, so the idea is that as the wood expands, instead of snapping because it's all tight, it'll just become unglued. So the whole violin tends to get unglued periodically, and you have to go in and have it re-glued together.
And then I'm going to ask you some like really random stuff. This has devolved into Ask a Violinist. We could make a whole YouTube thing on that. Rosin. Do you have a favorite kind of rosin that you apply that on the bow?
Well, rosin, there's all different kinds. I mean, rosin, I don't know if the listeners will realize, rosin is basically tree sap. It's like maple syrup, and they just do stuff to it to make it that you can put it on the hook. And I think for me, it's whatever's on sale. But I know there's a lot of voodoo stuff. Like some people, they'll have that tree sap stuff, and they'll put like flecks of gold inside, or they'll taint it.
Wow.
I had one. It looks like jade because they put all kind of like chemicals and things to make it. But I think as long as it's sticky and not too, I think the main thing is the level of stickiness. Like if you talk to a double bass player, because the strings are so much thicker, the rosin they put to make the hair stick to the string is much stickier than ours. So
interesting. Yeah. Okay, when you travel with your violin, do they charge you, or is that counted as a piece of carry-on luggage? I'm always curious about that.
It counts as a piece of carry-on luggage. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Although these days because that's why I'm playing modern instruments. In the olden days, they used to make the tip out of ivory. So now there's this huge custom because they're getting more strict now.
That's right.
So traveling, a lot of musicians have been stopped and their bows have been taken away from them because they've suspected that there's ivory in the tip. So that's kind of a scary thing. So, and actually the wood is also an endangered wood. It's from the Pernambuco tree in the Amazon forest. It's the only wood that has the proper strength and density to play at a high level.
Who needs trees when we have music?
and the thing is about that tree, in a forest of 1,000 trees, only one tree has grain that's straight enough to have a high-end bow. Wow. So it's pretty rare that stick, of the high-end bows. And so
has there been efforts to find an alternative?
There are. So I think these days they're making a lot of bows out of carbon fiber.
I was going to say monkey pot.
Yeah. But they're doing graphite and cardboard fibers, and they're pretty good. Well, like you could play professionally on them, but it's still not the same as the. Yeah.
I'm curious your take on, it seems like every generation there's like a rock star violinist. It seems like it's slowed down. There's Nigel Kennedy, and of course everyone knows, or maybe they don't know, Sarah Chang, then there's Lindsay Sterling. She does kind of that
Lindsay
pop, techno music. What do you think of that approach? I mean, it's great to reach the masses. Does it seem incredibly calculated? Is it commercial? Is it packaged? Or who's the other one? David. Hold on.
Oh, I know him. David Garrett.
Yes.
Yeah, he had this big promotion.
on PBS.
He allegedly set the Guinness Book of World Records for playing Flight of the Bumblebee faster than anybody else. I think that's his promotional stunt.
What's your take on that? I mean,
I think as long as you're doing what you do at a legitimate level, that you obviously paid the dues. I'm okay with it. Yeah, like Lindsay Sterling, she's maybe not a virtuoso violinist. Like if you were to compare her to some like graduates from Juilliard or Yasha
Right.
Hopkins, she's not one of those. But she takes her craft seriously. I mean, the production value on her videos and the arrangements are at a very high level. So
Yeah.
you got to give her street cred for that, just because she's putting in the dues in her own way. So.
Do you
Yeah.
think it's necessary? It seems like in the realm of classical music today, they always feel the need to make it sexy. What I mean, I guess that's just indicative of everything. Like,
Yeah.
wow, look, it's a sexy coffee mug.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is problematic? Do you think it's short-sighted? Do you think it's limiting? I mean, or do you think it's just human nature?
I think might be, and you know that it's an old trick. They've been doing that a long time, and even in classical music, everybody's always had a gimmick, and so I think things haven't really changed. They're always the same. I think Niccolo Paganini, he's one of the first rock star violinists. What was his gimmick? He actually had some kind of liver disease, like jaundice, so his skin was actually yellow. So he had pitched it to his audience. I sold my soul to the devil. That's why I can play these huge. And look, my skin's yellow. You know, everybody always had a gimmick, even back then. So, I mean, I don't think things have changed. Maybe the faces who are saying these things have changed, but it's the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, same smell, as we
Yeah.
say in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Would you like to send us off with a little bit of a song?
Okay.
Or something that you feel like sharing? I'm going to scratch here.
Oh, maybe, you know what I'll do is, this shout out to my students. This is a piece from Suzuki book Violin 3. This is always, I always tell my students, you always should review your old songs. So this is the song I've been playing since I was 7 years old.
Oh, that's awesome.
Okay.
That's wonderful. You know, for singers, we have something probably very similar. It's called Vakai. And there are all these little short songs and, you know, different exercises for different purposes. But I love that. You know, when you're playing, I thought of something. I know it would be great to just end it on that. But since you're here in the hot seat, I just wanted to ask you. Sometimes it's very, I think, it's easy for people when they're learning something, when they make a mistake, they verbalize it. I've heard people playing the piano, and the moment they hit a fault note, they'll say, oh, or oh, sorry, or oh. Like, what would you recommend to people to just not get into that habit? Because I think once it starts, it's very hard for people to break.
Yeah. Well, this is, you know, and it goes with living your life too. A lot of people in life in general, they worry about the future and then they have regrets about the past. The beautiful thing about being a performer is if you just try to focus on living in the moment, and that note that you missed, it's gone. So just let it go. And just live in the moment. And I think that's a lesson that music can teach people, is just to enjoy the moment you're in. And I think that's
exactly. And you know, and I say in a performance context, you might give a stellar performance, and there's some fool in the third row coughing throughout your whole your whole performance, or a crying baby, or whatever. So yeah, that ability to just release and let it go, as they say in Frozen. You know what? I'm going to say it again, as I said a minute ago, I guess. We must have you again, because there are so many things that you do. Can you tell us where we can find you on the internet, on your website, where we can hear you?
I think the best place is my YouTube channel, DuanePadilla.violin.
Okay, Duane Padilla.
Duane Padilla Violin. Yeah.
Think of it like a thriller with a P.
Yeah.
It's been really awesome to have you, and looking forward to having you again. Tune in next week when we will have the mystery guest. Even I am not sure who that will be, so it hopefully gives you good reason to tune in. This is The Art of Life. We have all of our episodes archived on The Art of Life with Willow Chang on Facebook. So if you're spending time at the doctor's office, or you have a long 3-day weekend ahead of you and you have nothing else to do, my goodness, get edumacated. Check it out. We're keeping it Pono. Aloha.